Hey guys.
Hello, Bryan.
Hey. You're both outdoors.
Yeah.
We are. Why aren't you? That's the question.
It's a good question. I don't know. I figured I'd rather just stay indoors for the rest of my life.
Well,
No.
Today we're going to listen to something different. Something we haven't listened to. The band we haven't anyway. It's called A Perfect Circle. Although I know for a fact that you guys have heard the band before because you've heard the song Doom by them. This song is called Talk Talk. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
fire away.
All right.
On miracle,
Wow.
That's pretty direct.
Yeah.
Little bit.
Do you have a year on that, Bryan?
Let's see. When did that come out? Maybe 5 years ago.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
So pre-COVID?
Yeah, let me go look it up. 2018.
Yep.
And they're from England?
They're from America.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So do we know if what else was going on? I'm trying to think about 2018. What else was going on?
Well, we were 2 years into the Trump administration.
Yeah,
There was that.
that's for sure. Yeah.
Well, and the reason I ask is that I had a complete sea change from how do I put this nicely? Religious people not doing their part, needing to step up to be this. We'll just be direct. You're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like we went from, or my perception went from, we're supposed to be helping here to, no, please just sit down and get out of the way. Which is like, it was sad and pathetic, and we went to just a worse level.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'd say dangerous. Oh, is this going public?
Yeah. No, don't worry about it.
It's just between the three of us.
Yeah, that's all.
Who could possibly be listening?
No, I mean, I think this is a challenge that this sort of a thing is a thing that's been driving me bonkers for as long as I can remember, thinking that like a lot of people say sort of pandering maybe isn't the right word, but that's the first word that came to mind. Sort of things like, oh, my thoughts and prayers are with you. And then literally their thoughts and prayers aren't with anyone, and they do zero. And like that those lines in that first stanza, adorable crisis, adorable as in terms of like thoughts and prayers, and then what about the crisis? It's like going on, like cake in a crisis, It's the whole, it is the sort of let them eat cake sort of idea, even just like, I'll say a thing, but really there's problems and I could do something about it, but let them sort it out. So, yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then that next line, that's get the fuck out of my way. Right? It's like, so you talk like you have all the answers and you are the answer, but really you're an impediment to the solution. You're in the way, and you're making things harder. And this is difficult. I mean, I think we were all raised with this idea that we're the only people that could possibly fix this thing. Until they come to us, or until somehow we are out there making that difference in the world, it's a lost cause. Thank God for us.
I'm reminded of the MLK quote, where he's like, the KKK isn't really the biggest problem we're facing in the South with civil rights. It's northern white, folks who call themselves Christians who are doing nothing to like stop this. That's not a direct quote, obviously, but it's the people who say they're the church and aren't doing anything that are actually the biggest impediment to the movement forward within the civil rights movement. And it's like the same story 60 years later.
funny. It's
right.
funny
You
how
just turn up the heat.
yeah, it's funny how
Uh,
Christians often seem to be the ones turning people off to Christianity the most.
what did Gandhi say? I like your Jesus. It's the people that I
There's
don't care for, or something like that.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and it's hard because humans are human, and and Christianity is aspirational, right?
Uh, you
As
know,
are most of the world's religions.
no.
Um, I think maybe the unique difference with Christianity is that we pretend that it's not aspirational, it's automatic. Like, say the
Hmm.
words, we've arrived, and don't have to really do anything after that. Somehow just being, not even being present. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Like, there's actually quoting of scripture in here. That it's not like other people don't know, and I don't know if these guys grew up in a church or anything like that, or had any sort of biblical Christian background or
Oh, they
whatever.
did.
Did,
They
the
had
lead
with those
the lead
lyrics.
singer's mother was a Christian. Although and we actually at one point we listened to a song that was Wings of Marie was a Tool
yeah.
song that this is the singer from Tool.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
yes, he grew up
Okay.
surrounded by
Yeah. So like actually quoting scripture of what life is supposed to be like for people who call themselves, Jesus followers. Faith without works is dead, and also talk without works is dead. That's not a direct quote, but like, and all we do is sit and talk, but we don't walk. And I love the last stanza is the one that really struck me. Try braving the rain, try lifting the stone, try extending a hand. These are like the easiest possible things we could do, you know? Go out into the rain, or help like lift a burden of someone else, or
extending
even
it.
just extend a hand. Like this is like the least common denominator. And yet how often do we just like walk on by and say, well, they earned it or they deserve it, their situation, or if I help, they're only going to abuse my goodwill or blah blah blah, like all these things that Jesus was totally the opposite about.
Yeah, that those last lines, very concrete, right? Um, that we throw these words around and love love the sinner, hate the sin, right? Which is impossible.
Or
Which is impossible, I think. It's so easy in the abstract, but uh, I think the old translation of love is charity, which gives it more, I don't know,
Action.
like action, an
uh,
action. Yeah, yeah. Where love is just kind of this fluffy thought. Oh,
a
think good
feeling.
thoughts about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers. Man, you knew where that was going.
um,
But the idea of charitable acts, this is love in action. What's like?
yeah. Love being a verb rather than a feeling. It's what you do, not just how you feel or what you think. This whole, even the first line, you're waiting on miracles, where we put all the onus on some sort of miraculous sort of thing to happen instead of taking any responsibility for doing stuff ourselves. And it's not like I'm not in this crowd of hypocritical people. Last week, this is me being honest and just showing that I'm a big dumb idiot. I'm with my oldest kid and my wife, and we pass by somebody who's like asking for money, and I look at my wallet and I don't actually have any cash, But my kid pulls out the wallet, and there's a 20, and he pulls it out to give it to this person. And I was like, oh, you don't have to do that. Like, we can make change or something. And she just looks at me and he's like, but I want to. Like, I have it. I don't have to have it. This is why I keep money in my wallet, you know, and totally humbling me. Yeah, I'm I'm not too far off of this guy's critique.
On the other hand,
Well, I
you have
think,
a kid who went and did that.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
right. Again, like all this stuff is aspirational. I mean, if the if the criteria is 100% all the time, right, or don't do anything,
Mhm.
but the hypocrisy in the church is that let's pretend we're 100% all the time, so we don't have to do anything, right?
Yeah.
None of this living up to our failings and our weaknesses. That's
Mhm.
crazy, right? So we could
Yeah.
actually get up in the morning and recommit and try again. It's again, it's kind of a done deal. Uh, I remember Bryan. I remember when at Big Idea when we were working there, and there were wonderful exceptions to this, but because it wasn't a Christian organization, right? I mean, th- because it was a mashup of a bunch of creative people that were working on something that we believed in, some of which happened to be Christian, others weren't. Um, I found it interesting that the the ones who didn't profess faith, and again, there are exceptions on both sides of this equation, but the ones that stood out would get up in the morning and try to be a good person actively in that space, right? And then it seemed like the ones who claimed to profess faith loudly, maybe the louder you professed it, the less you had to do that.
yeah.
It was it was all kind of, and I don't think it was conscious performance, but it seemed like it was performance.
Yeah.
When I was in grad school, well, at Fuller, in seminary, um, we talked about this idea of orthodoxy, like um, right belief, and then orthopraxy, right action, and that Christianity, and I would argue all religions, are ideally built on a balance of intentional orthodoxy, right belief, and intentional orthopraxy, right action. And they said, historically, some of the big challenges between like Protestant and Christian or Protestant and Catholic, uh, you know, folks or whatever has been not really people so much as like the big institutions or whatever, um, is like in Protestantism, it's all about orthodoxy, right faith. And in Catholicism, there's a lot more of a focus on orthopraxy, right action. And they're like, one of the hard parts is we are so mad at each other and always pointing out like the faults on the other side that we end up like the Protestants end up like only focusing on the right belief but don't do much, and the Catholics focus on right action but don't necessarily think too hard about their theology. And it's like, hey, maybe we should, you know, elevate both of these things a little bit more.
Well, and I, since I've stepped out of those circles, it's really almost shocking to step back in and listen to some conversations and go, wow, you people are so removed. Like all just get out of that bubble, that conversation where all these things seem to matter. Just just step away, you know? And there are things that matter, right? And and they become really evident when you step. I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who can keep who can stay in those circles and engage outside of it. But man, all the conversations that seems going on inside seem to be they, almost like sport. Like, we need to have these conversations because that's what good people do. They talk, right? And I think it's good to talk about this stuff, but go out and do something.
Yeah, while we deliberate, bodies
Engage.
accumulate. That's
Yeah.
it, right? That's what he says. So, yeah.
How do you think folks would take this song?
Which folks?
The folks that it's seems to be addressing.
Well, it's kind of a non-starter because they say the word.
That's what I was going to say. So that right there would be an excuse to not even listen to the rest of it.
To not even listen.
Yeah.
And yet that's the perfect word for where he's at and what he's talking about. And,
this is what language is for, right? You remember Tony Campolo?
Yeah.
Do you remember his famous introduction from Evangelical Breakfast?
Yeah, I remember.
I have three. He's talking to evangelical leaders. He says, "I have three things to say to you." The first speaks like over 30,000 children. If I have the number right, died. Maybe it was of malnutrition. Maybe in the last week. I don't know the numbers exactly. Number one, children are dying of malnutrition. Number two, you don't give a shit. Number three, you care more that I use the word shit than for those kids that are dying of malnutrition.
Yeah.
That's ballsy.
I know.
I don't think they asked him back.
No, I don't know that they did. And the thing that's sort of annoying is not the only thing, but I was reading through this and thinking you could almost sing this in a church as a worship song if you just took that word out. And people would be like, oh yeah, that's what they need to do. They need to go do this. They need to, and pointing the finger at you're right. Those people. And,
oh man,
I'm one of those
people.
You
are still right about
right?
that.
I'm one of those people that needs to get off my butt and do something.
So, yeah, and we can all own that, absolutely. But here's somebody who's obviously been raised in this faith, or at least has access, and spent a good deal of time leveraging this scathing criticism. How much do you think this resonates with people who, Bryan, you asked about the people on the inside, would they listen to this? And great answer, Matt. Just take the word fuck out of it. It makes a great praise song, right? I mean, they'd sing it every Sunday. Absolutely. Okay. But what about the people who are not part of this? How do you think they take this song?
Oh, it's pointing out the hypocrisy that is rampant.
I think that they would resonate the most with the line that the Christians would resonate the least with.
Which is?
Get the fuck out of my way.
Yeah. How much do we get in our own way? All the time. And in the way of other people. I mean, I think that we're bleeding out while you deliberate, bodies accumulate. That's so pointed with this idea of, you talk and talk and talk without taking any kind of action. Let's stop this thing and then maybe sort some other things out. Let's go do it. let's work on fixing the problem, and then we'll work out the details later.
And bleeding out, thoughts and prayers, this is definitely going after gun control and mass shootings, right? Culturally, there's no way around that, right? These are thoughts and prayers. Those are the words that are used
every time.
Have been used to the point where you
Every
can't
single
use them
time.
anymore.
Yep.
I know.
So, and I know. So it's easy to go to politics and say, well, you can just say the same thing about politics in a lot of ways, right? Just vote correctly, and then you can sort of disengage.
Yeah.
But I do think that politics is the art of managing like large groups of people. You can't not have it. You can't not have politics. You can have good politics and you can have bad politics. And why people of faith can't get on the correct side. We won't use right. The correct side of the solutions that can be had and made available in the world we live in, right? And instead, they've aligned with a couple of very convenient choices that they're passionate about. But it kind of exonerates them from having to engage. I remember when Heath was at the 509. I don't know if you were there then, Matt.
No, I came later.
I remember.
He had a number of really powerful sermons, but he framed this discussion as it's like a rock band and living in staying the night in trashing hotels and moving on in the morning. Evangelical sense of eschatology is basically, beam me up, Jesus. We're out of here. Why in the world would we invest in fixing this mess? And if you can't get your head around the value of what is here, if you're so jacked up on moving on and getting on to some reward, why would you hang around and fix this mess? And that's like deep in the evangelical theology of this world is not something that is worth fixing. It's the next life. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and yet when Jesus teaches us how to pray, early on in the prayer, it says, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Like, it's supposed to be
come.
now. Yeah, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. It's supposed to be happening now. It's not about some future thing. It's about the today. So let's start doing it today. We were walking home from church a couple of weeks ago, and we were saying, we really love our community. We really love the people that we worship with. We really love being inspired by sermons and stuff. But I wonder how much more valuable and actually how much more Christ-like it would be if instead of spending a bunch of money on a building, we all met doing community service projects and helping people, and then talked about the Bible and talked about our faith and shared our concerns and even confessed to one another where we're really struggling while we were helping people, while we were trying to make the world better. I wonder if that would actually be a far more vibrant community of believers, and then we'd have all this money that we weren't spending on a church building, to invest in making our communities better. But
be worth a shot.
Yeah, and it feels like we might actually be doing the stuff that these guys are critiquing us not doing. We save our service projects for a special week or a special weekend or a trip to some other country or whatever to help poor people who can't support themselves otherwise or whatever. And it's like, yeah, actually, though, we could just, instead of going and doing a short-term mission, we could just put all that money into like paying local people to do the work that they're already trained to do in their local community. If what they need is money, let's just do that and support them as like craftspersons. And then here we can like clean up our own community. We can do our own trash pickup. We can support people with, housing needs. We can help feed people who are hungry. We can visit people in prison. Oh, for crying out loud. We could actually, how many of us have even ever visited a prison or even a jail? Like, but sorry, I'm soapboxing it. Sorry.
I know. I know. I mean, growing up, I mean, there were like my local church. There were these older women that would weekly go to prisons, minister to, and I'm very, very fortunate that we had an active church community growing up. I benefited, man. They covered our mortgage. They worked on our house. We were the orphans and widows that they felt like they needed to take care of, my family. Um, but then I think that even so, when it came time to engage the culture, this was a subculture, right? This was cut off from the good people doing good things, but isolated. And I felt like very claustrophobic in many ways. So they were wonderful and they supported me, even coming back from doing stupid things. No questions asked. You're welcome. You're welcome here. But there was never really a chance to connect beyond that. Like, what's next? It just. So I'm skeptical, Matt. I'm skeptical if faith communities. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't wonderful examples of that, but it's almost like by their nature they're exclusive and they're cut off. And I mean, man, I this is a reflection of where I'm at right now. It's like just go out there and be the church and find the and don't ask people what they believe as a litmus test for whether or not you'll work alongside them shoulder to shoulder, because that's the biggest problem.
That sounds like
I'd love to work with you on this
something we've all
project.
seen.
If you're gay,
Right.
or you're not this or you're not that. I find that like, fuck it. Let's just go and do shit and try to do good things with people who want to do good things. Right? And maybe keep your mouth shut about why you're doing it. Unless somebody asks. I don't know.
I think there's a lot of people in the Christian community, in the faith community, in lots of religions, I would suppose, who really want to live lives like this. Like there's a desire to do this, but we haven't really created a culture within those faith communities of doing the doing, and I mean, I have to believe that we're not the only three people who sit around sort of bemoaning this kind of thing. Bryan, you keep bringing on all these artists and songs, these prophetic voices saying, the world can and should be different, and pointing out like different sort of hypocrisies, whether they be religious or political or personal or whatever that is. I believe that there are millions and millions of us out there that wish that there was like some sort of not just culture, but even just like a community that actually is doing this stuff normally, regularly. And then it takes somebody to just like get it rolling. There's these really lovely ladies in our town who actually do go to prisons and hang out with people and write them letters all the time and build relationships with them. And there are these like retired women who go into these spaces and do that. And it's like, man, I wish that I'd grown up with that as like part of what I did, so that it was a normal thing for me to be like, oh yeah, and this week we should head over to the prison and visit those folks or whatever that we've been building relationships with.
So here's what I'm pushing a little bit against, Matt, is that community of believers that are going to go out and change the world, right? Why don't we just go out and change the world and work with communities that are out there already doing
Oh, for sure.
it? And don't go out like a club or a gang or in your own little protective bubble, because that gets weird fast. I mean, there's so many stories of of you know, mission trip. Not that there aren't some good things that have happened in mission trips. I have good stories and bad stories, but from people on the receiving end of some of these mission trips, it's just kind of laughable as they show up for a week, they do something, and then they leave, and um, and then there's the people that go and live there and work with the people and become a part of that community. So it's almost like to identify with this community means you can't really be part of that community. And that community is the one that needs the help.
Mm.
So if it's
So we're
either
still
or,
outsiders coming into something.
and I'm not so sure it isn't either or. I think my own life, it's the successes and the times I feel most active and alive in my faith is when I'm subversive,
Oh yeah.
in the sense that I'm like this outsider that brings something that maybe you haven't heard before, but I'm here to listen as much as I am to participate. What do you need me to do?
Yeah.
Right?
I'm totally with you on that one. The whole, especially within our culture over the last couple hundred years, there's this huge white savior complex, right? And I'm not about that. I think what I'm getting at is like, I think there's a lot of people who wish that this was a part of their DNA. That like they just, I feel this way. I think there's got to be a lot of others that just wish that when we got up in the morning, it was built into our schedules to just be good and kind and generous to other people, and that when we saw a need, we actually reached out and did it. I mean, I can count probably 4 times in the last week or two that I drove by people who are having car trouble instead of stopping.
I wonder if it feels like people are less kind than they have been, and you definitely see that with all the online and social media stuff, and I kind of feel like it bleeds over. But yeah, I mean, I just like in doing public art projects, the response that I get online is often pretty mean.
To public arts projects?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I don't want my taxes paying for that, or that's ugly. It doesn't. I don't like that kind of art, or yeah, I knew this was going to be awful, or
Wow.
yeah. But in person, not so much. People are nice. They're I may get a scowl here and there, but at least they aren't, they're not emboldened to say stuff that they because it would be to my face. But yeah, I don't know. I just think culturally, that's playing into it too. I think people are just tend to be less kind.
I think people are on edge more.
Definitely more polarized.
More polarized. I got accosted in the bagel shop the other day, and it was early, and I probably was not making up my mind quick enough, and there were some things about my sort of early morning before my coffee sort of probably wasn't being as efficient in line as I could have been. But man, I had never been confronted I basically pointed out to the girl behind the counter that she shouldn't put the sweet bagel in with the garlic bagels because it's like, don't do that. And maybe I was a little, quick to say it, but the guy behind me just went off. And then the woman behind him said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Whoa, where is this coming from?" I'm wondering, we used to be the Midwestern trope was that everybody was really very friendly, would talk your ear off and take you home for dinner. And I don't think, on the other hand, I was in New York a few weeks ago in the subway and everybody was super nice. I wonder if it's flipped.
I lived in LA for 12 years, and I grew up in the Midwest. I moved back to the Midwest, and I I think that from my experience, there are. I think I would have thought growing up that people in the Midwest are a lot kinder, nicer, gentler, whatever. People in big cities are the opposite. Having lived in both for kind of split my life in half, I don't see the differences. In fact, a lot of times in big cities, I see a lot more patience, kindness, uh, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Well, big cities, you're sort of forced to be in community, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to at least if you're awake, right, and care at all,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, you be mindful about the space that you're living.
It
Yeah.
it does.
We go ahead, Bryan.
Midwesterners. I've been surprised a little bit about how fearful they seem. A lot of them seem to be really motivated by fear.
So, yeah, and maybe a little bit of victimization, which I don't think is necessarily too separate. I think that there's a connection between the victimization of like a localized space, like maybe Midwest, and even just sort of evangelical Christianity over the last 10 years or something like that, sort of taking on some sort of mantle of victimization. So maybe those things are connected in some way. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there's been some hard times, right? I mean, there's been some, the American dream's gotten beat up a bit. And, there's been, over the last 30 years, factories shut down. I mean, there's been some difficult things that people are up against, but I think that, well, I'm gonna blame the Trump phenomena, not him necessarily, because I think he's a symptom of a greater problem, but also he knows how to exploit it and exacerbate it. But there's a lot of resentment going on in the Midwest, just good people getting shit on, right? And I think they're done with it, right? They're done with it. Now you're going to hear it. It's going to be loud. One would think that had there been some policies in the past that were doing the right thing, that maybe we wouldn't be quite as far along as we are in this mess. But hard to say. Hard to say. But you're right, Bryan. There's a lot of fear.
Yeah,
out there.
And there's a lot of manipulation that's going on, that's playing off fear.
Fear mongering.
Yeah, fear mongering. Where you're getting your information from, always catering to fear.
Yeah. Fear is a really powerful tool to create a power differential. It is a tool. You can really use fear as a tool to differentiate between powerful and powerless. And whether or not the reality of who has power and who doesn't exists in the way that you present it. Fear exacerbates the us-them mentality.
And it's a lot harder to do stuff when you're in that us versus them, it's hard to help out them when it's. Yep. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, we deliberate and while bodies accumulate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so much of what's needed, whether it's in a creative act or whether it's policy and trying to sort of figure out how to preserve, how to look out for the future. It requires a sense of faith, a patience that says, I'm not going to get mine now. We're going to wait. We're gonna invest and possibly lose, but without that act of generosity and graciousness and patience, then we're down to, I want mine now. And if I don't get it before you, there might not be any left.
Nerd.
And I feel like that is what we're living in right now. Like if you say,
scarcity.
Hey, how about if you, it's scarcity, but it's a scarcity of goodwill.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's
I was listening to something, I don't even remember where it was. It was a podcast maybe 6 months ago. And they were talking about immigration. And one of the people was trying to make the point that America does not have an immigration problem or crisis. What America has is a welcoming problem and crisis. And it was trying to turn the conversation around this idea that we say all these things that we believe in, and yet we don't always take action on those things. And it wasn't, I don't know how much they were trying to make a point about policies as much as they were about, like the heart element of like how we approach these problems. If we were deeply concerned about an issue like, say, immigration, what if we approached it with a heart of welcoming, of generosity, and of love, kindness? Would we create then policies or adopt policies grown out of that rather than out of scarcity, out of fear, out of whatever other kinds of things, we feel?
And scarcity and fear will tell you that they will take our jobs and rape our wives, right? I mean, those aren't exaggerations. Those are literally talking.
No, those are
right?
that's almost
Those are
word
quotes.
for word what's
those are
being told to people.
Quotes. Yeah. And yet the opposite of that. And it's true. I mean, there is a way to be generous and gracious without being foolish and reckless. But that takes time, creativity, money, resources, right? You have to actively work towards those things, and it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yep.
We make it more complicated than it needs to be, though. We do the deliberating while bodies accumulate. We really do make it far more complicated. And that's partly because of the systems that we've created, but I think also just because of the attitude that we take,
Well, I would go back to this comment that, politics is an art. And we don't think of it as one. We think of it as, a lot of times we just think well, on the right, it's bad. Politics is a bad thing, right? If government would just get out of the way, we could do good things. But the fact is that you need some mechanism to govern people. And that takes a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of talent to be so yes, we do tend to overcomplicate things, but things get overcomplicated when you scale them up anyways. And people are complicated, and hurting people, hurting with a D, is extremely complex, right? And there are people who are gifted at that, and some of them actually aren't yet jaded, right? Completely jaded. But with all the money in the system, and there's New York Times just made a video. They interviewed 12 12 Congress people that are leaving office at the end of their term. And they just left the camera rolling and asked them, what good have you done while you're here? Why are you leaving? Um, one thing you're proud of, right? It's amazing to listen to these lawmakers talk, and they're like, there's some good people there, and they have either that or they're totally bullshitting the camera, but right, but they're up against tremendous odds because of the way the system's been built and the way the system's been gamed. So yes, it is complicated, but it we only tend to have an appetite for simple solutions, and then when simplistic solutions don't work,
Uh-huh.
I have a limo driver.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a winning mentality too, so much on all sides, where it's like the focus is on it. The idea is that compromise is actually this very negative thing,
Oh yeah.
because
weak.
I'm gonna have to give up something. If I'm giving up something, then I'm weak. I've lost.
Yeah.
But the word politics actually means many voices, and that, I mean, it inherently means that there's going to require it requires some kind of working together, and it's not just collaborating, everyone agreeing on everything. It's about compromise, and compromise doesn't have to be bad. This is actually how the world works. You don't always get your way, and if we're teaching our children that we always have to get our way, dude, we're screwed.
Yeah. Well, and the uncompromising voices are the loudest, it seems.
Always.
Yeah.
Well, we have a system that is rewarding. It's rewarding that, and now some of this is unforeseen, right? Who would have thought that performing for TikTok is a more powerful return on your investment as a senator than actually reaching across the aisle and getting something done, right? Because and this goes back to those interviews, because so much of your time is spent fundraising so you can stay in office, right? This is where they should have pulled that. There have been so many attempts at taking money out of the whole electoral system, and nobody's been able to do it yet. So going viral on TikTok turns out to be one of the best campaign fundraisers imaginable. And if you have no ethical problem with causing some of the problems you're causing by doing that, there's your ticket. It's gonna keep you elected. We didn't build a system in anticipation of all that's going on right now.
No.
Nope.
I mean, the whole point is that, like, people who are in politics, their job is supposed to be public servants. They're supposed to be the ones serving everybody else. And when your focus is on raising a bunch of money so you can keep your jobs, you can stay in there, so you can be influential, so you can have power, whatever it is. And I get that when it's hard to make gains unless you have relationship building and you're in it for a long time, and you have some of that. But man, sometimes I just think, I wonder if, like, 4-year term limits for everybody wouldn't be a terrible idea. But then but then do you just reinvent the wheel all the time? Everybody's got to start from scratch learning how to do it, or I don't know.
Yeah. 4 years for everybody, I think that would be a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? But there's some reasonable conversations to be had about longer term limits for people in the Senate. And I think we can all agree Mitch McConnell probably for his own legacy, probably should have stepped down a decade ago, right? I think he should have stepped down, maybe like 40 years ago, but that's because we differ on so many things. But no, there's a lot of things that could be put into place, but we have, who's gonna make those guardrails and those guidelines? Oh,
Sure.
the people in power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've drifted significantly from the point of this song.
Well, I was wondering.
Yeah.
Wondering if how much actually does this play into like what the song is talking about? How much does Christianity and American Christians and evangelicals getting caught up in all of the political stuff play into where we're at? Because there's a definite that to me seems like a big piece of the puzzle, or at least part of it.
Well, clearly, because we ended up on that thing, that we're drawing our own connections there.
Yeah.
Well, so to the degree that American politics and policy is beholden to Christians and that voting bloc, is that keeping us from being able to do some things in the world that we should be doing? And most recently, the war in Gaza right now is just like we seem paralyzed because and we're actually reading a book on it right now, and it's amazing how much of the end times theology of the West has contributed to building up Israel as an unstoppable force. Like that whole history is pretty insane. And there's like three players involved: Zionism and we'll just say world powers and things like that, and then this end times theology that looks to the Middle East and Israel specifically and holds it up as like a major acquisition, a major point of theological power, I guess. If you remove that from our history, there's a very good chance that there would not be the situation that we have right now in Israel. And that just for good or bad, right? It's just saying that people's belief systems and get back to the song, right? Like, but Jesus wasn't talking about any of that, the power, right? In fact, his whole subversive act in being crucified was to give up the power, and yet it's become central to the power game.
Yeah, the model for us is to give up our lives and serve people. And clearly, if you're reading through the text, like support people on the margins and
that sounds
and
pretty
think
weak.
critically.
That sounds pretty weak.
And think critically about people on the inside. I mean, Jesus did not come to create either a religion or a political movement. And Jesus made it pretty clear that wasn't the point when they asked him about, paying taxes and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's this was not a political revolution he was trying to instigate. So.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's a good way to end it. I like it.
All right.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Thanks again, guys.
Well,
really
thank you, Bryan.
Thank you.
Good song.